Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's truly an honor and a privilege to speak to you all about my experience studying Congress. For the last 13 years, I have been the creator and host of the Congressional Dish podcast, which examines the actions of the US Congress. I examine government, not politics. Now, the light bulb moment for this idea for this podcast came when I was watching C-SPAN in 2011, and I witnessed a member of Congress successfully slip an amendment into an energy and water funding bill that protected secret campaign contributions, which was an action he bragged about on the House floor. But more shocking than that evening I watched every television news broadcast and I scoured the internet, and not one person seemed to notice. And so after that, I started reading bills and watching hearings and discovered that Congress was slipping scandals into legislation all the time, and no one was noticing. And so that disconnect was driving me crazy and making me quite unpleasant to be around. And so I started the podcast hoping to share this information with other people who care. And I will say that I'm thrilled to tell you that thousands of people have proven to care so much that they have turned my little project into my full-time career, which is obviously great news for me, and it does give me hope. But unfortunately, the phenomenon that launched my career, the fact that congressional actions are largely being ignored by the media at large, that continues, and it continues to our detriment. And so thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you what I have learned. My hope today is that perhaps my story and my discoveries will inspire some in the generation that you're currently educating to grab the torch that I have lit and run with it, because Americans as a whole do not understand how our branch of government works. So first, the first discovery that I'd like to share with you, and it's extremely relevant today, is that to our members of Congress, our government lurching from emergency situation to emergency situation is a feature. It's not a bug, which is why, as I speak to you today, our government is once again largely shut down. And this particular emergency is due to the broken government funding process, which neither of the two parties ruling this country are currently incentivized to fix. You might not know this, that the government has not been properly funded on time since 1996. And as the parties have gotten increasingly shameless in their partisanship in Congress, they have increasingly used government funding as a vehicle for unpopular hitchhikers to sneak their way into law. And by that, I mean that they use the must-pass, must-sign nature of government funding as a vehicle for legislation that wouldn't be politically possible to pass into law on its own. Specifically, they sneak their partisan wishes into law as attachments on massive government funding bills, and they hold the entire government hostage if the other party tries to prevent it. Now, politically, this strategy was invented by the Republicans. So, for example, during the early days of Congressional Dish, it was Republicans who tried to use it to gut the Affordable Care Act, while President Obama held the veto pen. And then Republicans tried to get border wall funding using this method during the first reign of President Trump, which led to the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Now, it didn't work anytime the Republicans tried it, but that's not stopping the Democrats from using the strategy right now, as they try to get Affordable Care Act subsidies extended, Medicaid cuts from the Big Beautiful Bill reversed, and they're trying to limit the power of Russell Vought, who is the Office of Management and Budget Director. Now, you've probably heard about the ACA subsidy demand, but perhaps not the others. But all of those demands and more are present in the Senate Democrats' funding bill, which has been voted on at least 10 times in the last month or so. And so as I watch what's happening right now, I see that the media has done a dreadful job of telling the American people what exactly the Democrats are demanding, because they seem to take our politicians at their words instead of reading the legislation that's being voted on. But if I can read these bills, so can they. They just don't. And so that's how we end up in these situations where the American people can't really direct congressional activity because we simply don't understand it. But the main point I'm trying to get across here is that emergency situations like this are being created on purpose to get partisan priorities to hitchhike their way into law. Both parties are guilty of it, and the main vehicles for this behavior is government funding legislation and the National Defense Authorization Act, which is consistently passed into law annually with bipartisan support. The second discovery I'd like to share with you, and I think it's kind of cliche to say it at this point because I think most of us are aware of it, but it does need to be said that corporate capture in our Congress is real. And I think the American people would be stunned if they understood the true extent of it. Specifically, I've been amazed by the bills that would clearly hurt me personally as a working class American who values my health, because the bills that I'm seeing are designed to enhance the profits of the investor class. And to be specific, I've noticed that the banking, war, pharmaceutical, chemical, and fossil fuel industries in particular have a hold over way too many of our legislators. And whenever I read a bill or an amendment that clearly favors corporate titans and hurts regular working people, I always use the resources provided by Open Secrets, which tracks the campaign donations received by members of Congress. Now, the reporting is not exact because there are some enormous loopholes that allow political donations to be funneled to politicians and the parties in secret. But even with the imperfect reporting that we have, I almost always find the industry being favored listed in that member of Congress's top 10 list of their most generous donors. It is remarkable how consistently it happens. And so the website for looking up the money given to our members of Congress and presidential candidates is opensecrets.org. I think if we're teaching about Congress in this century and not teaching about campaign donations and how to track them, we're only telling our students part of the story. The money is pulling our legislators' strings. Now, shifting gears into how Congress operates, I've also learned that we need a lot more eyeballs on one committee in particular, and that's the Rules Committee in the House of Representatives. The Rules Committee is essentially a legislative bottleneck. The Rules Committee, which is heavily influenced by the Speaker of the House, gets to decide what bills get votes in the House. They also decide what amendments get to be voted on, amendments to those must-pass, must-sign pieces of legislation. And while there are some maneuvers around it, such as a discharge petition, which, by the way, is what 217, soon to be 218 members of the House are going to use to force a vote on the Epstein files, while that maneuver exists, it's rarely used, which means an enormous amount of power is in the hands of the 13 members of the Rules Committee. And the way that I see it, power being concentrated like this in the hands of 3% of the House of Representatives, I think this setup is disenfranchising most of the country. But we can't combat what we don't understand. And I would be shocked if the percentage of Americans who have even heard of the Rules Committee is even in the double digits. And not only is the Rules Committee extremely powerful, it's also fascinating to watch because it's not structured like many of the other committees, which limit debates to 5 minutes per member. In the Rules Committee, they have actual debates. And these are often the only real debates that occur on the massive pieces of legislation which sneak so much into law. And these debates can go on for hours. Sometimes they go on all night. And the members of Congress really get into it, like they yell at each other. Now, for me, it's sound clip gold. But for the country, these debates are useful windows into the motivations of the leaders in both parties. And I feel like I could devote all of my time to just covering the Rules Committee, and I would have more content than I'd know what to do with. And so I just wish that more people knew that it exists. Because I think that if there were more eyes on the Rules Committee, we would understand the concept of a do-nothing Congress, even in this Congress, with the House now on vacation for over a month and counting. Even now, there is no such thing as a do-nothing Congress. If we were well-informed on just the Rules Committee, we would see that Congress is doing way too much, and they do it all at once. Which brings me back to the purposeful manufactured crisis situations. Because time and time again, those are solved with bills that have literally thousands of pages, which are passed with not even close to enough time to read them, which is again by design because of the secret hitchhikers. And this doesn't just happen in emergency situations. The so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which was 870 pages, made massive society-changing decisions that have yet to be noticed by the public at large, even though the effects are being felt and captured on video every day lately. Specifically, just one paragraph in the Big Beautiful Bill, in section 90003, that section allows ICE to detain anyone for any amount of time while they determine that person's immigration status. This is how 170 American citizens that we know of so far have been held for many hours, some for days, by ICE despite their citizenship status. That's an enormous change to the reality of living in the United States enacted by a do-nothing Congress. But that's not nothing to me. But our congressional reporters, they don't read the bills or laws. The vast majority of those explaining Congress cover politics, not government. And I will say that traveling around with campaigns and reporting on political gossip, that does sound like a much more fun career than mine. But that media reality is how something that is changing our society in such a scary way before our eyes can be slipped into law during a do-nothing Congress. But here's the good news. I found it. And I've found a lot of secrets and fascinating stories in Congress. In fact, one of the hardest parts of my job that I frankly haven't figured out what to do with even after 13 years, but the hardest part is how to handle the fact that I can't possibly cover everything Congress does. I have so much more content than I know what to do with. Because not only is Congress constantly legislating, but Congress is also conducting fascinating investigations, which happen all the time in the committees, far more than even C-SPAN can cover. And don't get me twisted, C-SPAN is a national treasure. I am a proud C-SPAN evangelist. But C-SPAN has a limited number of camera crews, and their cameras are big, which means that the members of Congress know when they are being filmed, and they perform for the cameras. But there are dozens of hearings on busy workdays, and in the off C-SPAN hearings, that's often where things get real. Those hearings are where I see the bickering, but also the cooperation. So for example, over Thanksgiving, I'm going to be releasing an episode about a congressional investigation into the bankruptcy of 23andMe and the status of our regulations governing what private companies can do with our genetic information. And spoiler alert, there are no regulations. But there was no partisanship in that hearing, and those types of investigations happen more than you might think. But my main point in telling you this is that anyone can do what I'm doing. All you need is a computer and you have everything you need. I have never lived in Washington, D.C. I have exactly one friend who works in Congress, and he's a staffer, and I only met him last year. All of the resources that I use on a daily basis, the congressional record and the hearing footage from the committee websites and the House and Senate floors, it's all public information. And so far, it has proven itself immune to the Trumpian chaos. And so that's what I feel honored to be able to share with you today, as you are guiding students and picking your future careers. We need more people exposing the actions of Congress, not the congressional elections, not the politics. We need people to inform the public on what Congress actually does. And my career is proof that Americans are hungry for this information. Now, it took me 5 years, but I do want to tell you that I make a nice six-figure income now, and I do it using a business model based entirely on trust. Because one of the reasons that I believe that other journalists avoid the work that I do, because as I said earlier, corporate capture is real. Banking, pharmaceuticals, fossil fuels, and the war industry. Watch the commercials next time you watch cable news. Look at the ads in the newspapers. Those same industries are paying the media too. Those companies are their customers, not us viewers. And so corporate journalists have to be careful not to bite the hands that feed. But there is a new way of funding journalism, and it's working. And I call it value for value. Essentially, by telling people the truth as I see it, no matter how many people get mad at me, but by providing them all of my sources and by admitting my mistakes on air, I have built trust with my audience. And in return, I trust that the audience will pay me for my work. And they do. It's all optional. It's all honor system. And they do. And you're seeing more people funding their work the same way with like Patreon and Substack and other direct payment options. And now, as we move into an era with AI slop making increasingly difficult to tell what's real and what's fake, I strongly believe that we are going to value trust in our fellow humans even more going forward. And so I guess I just wanted to tell you that my career is an option for the next generation. And I am begging the next generation to take my idea and run with it and help me expose Congress for what it really is and what it really does. Thank you for having me today, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting discussion. Yeah, we'll open it up to the floor. If you have a question, feel free to use your little hand icon on Zoom. I'll give it a few moments, and then I certainly have some things that I could ask. I see some people maybe gearing up, maybe not. Okay. Um, so I will say that. Oh yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Bridget, but it seemed like you were winding up. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Despite starting college in like a Zoom era, I have no idea how all the things work. This is really interesting, Jen. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you have a way of identifying what are some of these like unpopular policies or partisan policies that are getting snuck into like large appropriation bills. So I can think of one is like um, a few years ago in the farming appropriation bill, they had a statement on misoprostol, which is the drug that induces abortions. So like, how do you identify? Is it just like you will watch these bills and you say, oh, this is actually really not something that goes with this bill? Or just like, what's your identification strategy for finding these unpopular or sneaky partisan politics?
Do you mean before they make it into the legislation?
Or just ones that are in the legislation. Like you're right, no one's talking about it. It's hard to identify them. Like where do you see this?
So here's the nasty truth of it. I just read it. I just read the law and it takes a long time. So like the big beautiful bill was it took me July, all of July. Now I do now have a assistant and she is a professional librarian, so she does a really good job of helping me with the research. But for years I was just doing the grunt work of looking through it. Now, when it comes to government funding bills, there is a lot of copying and pasting that goes on with government funding. And so I've gotten good enough to know where the bodies are buried. So it's like I know which sections to look at. It speeds up the process quite a bit. But with something like the Big Beautiful Bill, where it's all brand new legislation, I literally read line for not line. I wish there was a shortcut, but there just isn't.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on that same point. You used the phrase AI slop as kind of a negative, obviously. But where do you see AI tools helping define stuff or to summarize? Do you think that's a possibility?
I'm hoping it's a possibility. I did, so with working with the Big Beautiful Bill, I wanted to try to see if ChatGPT could help me. And
Hmm.
so I decided to take the extra time to read the bill and then say, like section 9003, tell me what it does, ChatGPT. But the problem is ChatGPT can't tell the difference between the enacted version and the 15 versions that came before that. So it just got really confusing. And so it's just not there yet with legislation. Where the Big Beautiful Bill episode, where ChatGPT helped me a lot, was in the tax episode because I split it into two. And so the one that was about the money, I can conceptually understand some of those tax provisions, but I don't know how to explain them all because I'm not a tax professional. I have all of my parents are accountants, so that does help. But ChatGPT helped me a lot because I would put my notes into ChatGPT and say, explain this to me like I'm a seventh grader. And so that really just helped me find these simpler words for complicated topics. But it's just for the research part, it just doesn't know fact from fiction yet. I just can't trust it. So even when I look it up for, we're looking up all these different confirmations that are being passed all at once now in the Senate. So we're trying to speed up that process. But even something as simple as tell me about this person's background, it still gets that wrong because it'll take like a Reddit post and it's like, that's not fact. And so what I'm using ChatGPT for is to help me collect sources faster. But I always have to go straight to the sources. So it's like I'll look in the sources list and like, okay, good, here's this person's LinkedIn. And then I'll skip the stuff that I know to be incorrect. But it's in the future, can it be reliable? Maybe. Is it there now? Absolutely not.
Thank you.
So I'll ask a question. So I'm curious about like the blogging space. If the way that you pitch your podcast is very similar to kind of the way C-SPAN frames itself in terms of a nonpartisan place to talk about politics, etc. And so, do you think over the last 5 years, as the country has become increasingly polarized, that you're finding a larger audience that is interested in that type of subject matter, or is it moving in the opposite direction, where as the country has become more polarized, like this idea of moderation is becoming less enticing? I'm just curious from your own listeners.
So my audience has stayed weirdly stagnant. It hasn't gone up and it hasn't gone down. Um, and I think there's two factors going on there. So there's a conference called Podcast Movement, and I've been going to this for years. It's the biggest podcasting conference in the world. And for most of us indies, all of our audiences are either stagnant or going down. And so there's something at work there that we don't quite understand, but it's happening to all of us. So I don't really know if that's the cause of it, but I do know that I've had some long-term supporters, especially in the last few weeks, that have reached out to me and they've stopped funding. They said they'll come back some point, but like they're for their own mental health, turning it off. And I understand it. And it's something that I struggle with because I feel like I'm constantly giving people bad news lately. This is why I desperately look for the good news stories, and I found a few, but it's hard. So I think right now it's not really the partisanship that's hurting shows like mine. It's just the Trump years are exhausting. Like the news, I feel it. Like I need to get away from it. And so I understand when people aren't seeking it out anymore. We saw a pretty big increase in our audience in the beginning of the Biden years, which was kind of wild. So I think people are more likely to seek out information when it doesn't feel like a tidal wave of information every day.
I want to ask one quick follow-up since we're on the subject of blogs, or not, sorry, not blogs, but podcasts. So here at the CCSE, the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement, we have an annual podcast competition. The judging panel is mostly Robert and myself, and I like to call it two Boilermakers on a couch, because the quality of these podcasts vary quite a bit. Some are quite good, some are not. But honestly, it's hard for me to evaluate like what makes a good podcast beyond just, the students seem to be enthusiastic, they have good content. But from somebody who's doing this as a profession, like what makes like a good podcast from your perspective? Like what sort of things should I be looking for?
So, value. This is what I tell all the newbie podcasters, that you have to provide some kind of value. So what's valuable about my show is not my opinion about the legislation. It's the fact that I read it. It's the fact that I'm telling you stuff that's just like in black and white. And most importantly, it's that you can go to my show notes and see exactly where I got my information from. That's something that's missing a lot in podcasting journalism, like everywhere. You just don't know where people are getting their information from. And I think if you can't judge someone's sources, you can't you can't like judge whether or not you can trust them. So no matter what the topic is, if you're providing value, I think you can be successful in this space. So for example, I'm a beach volleyball player, and there's a bunch of different podcasts about it. The ones that I listen to are the ones that are explaining to me the Olympic qualification process, because that's difficult to understand. And so if you can break that down for me, great. But the ones that are just like, oh yeah, did you see that hit? Like, I don't need to hear that, So I think Joe Rogan being so successful has made podcasters think that their opinions are more valuable than they are. But I think that if you want a career in this space, put some work into it. Give people something they can't get anywhere else, and that's the path to success.
Well, thank you so much. And I think with that, we have about 2 more minutes to the top of the hour. I think we'll end it at that. Please, everyone, let's give Jen another round of applause for joining us for today. And again, if you or somebody that you know would benefit from this discussion and was not able to attend today's talk, we will be posting the video onto our website. So please check that out. And again, Jen, thank you so much. It was excellent. So thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.